Animation is a sequence of images, and as the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So just watching 5 minutes of any animated film can tell you a story. But what about that picture before the final image? What is said from those? I'm talking about the production materials, the monumental amount of assets produced, concept art, storyboards, in-between, colored cells, all those assets combined to make the presentable, polished images. So are those pictures before the final just a means to an end? Do they not say anything? Just an ingredient in a pretty cake? Or can they stand as artwork on their own? For majority of production materials, yeah, they're a tool to reach the final product, but through countless productions in history, there are legitimate artworks before the finished piece that you can argue deserve their own spotlight, and I find that a lot in anime layout. Anime is known for a lot of things, and one feature is the high quality animation. The 2D animated aesthetic is iconic in its character design, but especially the style of animation. The explosive fights, incredible effects, and endless running is easily recognizable. But people had to have made these. A methodical process was refined to make an industry that can consistently produce more and more great images. This is called a pipeline, and just like in oil, it's meant to move resources from one stage to another, constantly refining it to a consumable product. No matter the project, whether for film, TV, spin-offs, or commercials, there are artists drawing thousands of frames for that pipeline. Even today, with many tools, the anime industry still dominantly draws their frames on paper and digitally. At the start is a lot of planning. A number of pre-production departments plan everything. They determine how characters look and their personality, what the world will feel like, and technical issues like how to achieve a specific effect. One step known as storyboarding is when the director frames the actual shots. These are small frames showing the composition and how shots flow into one another, kind of like a bird's eye view of all the shots. Elements like dialogue, story beats, shot lengths are created in storyboards. But these drawings aren't expected to get any details down, their focus is on the big ideas. So a director can create their vision by meticulously drawing their details into the storyboards. What's more common in anime though are simpler storyboards, more crude and sometimes indecipherable to what is happening. In defense of the rough storyboards, the directors are typically under tight deadlines or lack energy, both of which are very common in anime. The shot could be very simple too and not demand lots of direction. This is still a good thing because what matters is presenting the overall story, drawing what is important. The rest of production has to interpret the storyboards, faithfully bringing the storyboards to life, and so the director's vision to life. How that is accomplished is down to the animators, and this is when layout comes in. For the shots where directors neatly draw their storyboards with lots of detail, the layout artist understands the job that needs to be done. A good example are Studio Ghibli's storyboards where director Hayao Miyazaki has a very specific image in mind. Other times with a more rough storyboard, the direction is up to the animator. Unlike animation from the rest of the world, Japanese animators have a lot more control over their shots in general. Within the limits of a storyboard, the way they do their job has a healthy amount of freedom. The animator draws the genga, translated literally as original drawing, origins to the final composited image. Genga is the image before the final image. They are colorful illustrations with choppy animation or intertwined with rough sketches, and technical notes popping up for half a second. These images may look incomplete or even too colored, but this is the foundation upon which everything afterwards is based off of, and more importantly, how the final image turns out. This is where the art is truly made. These foundational drawings map out what the final pictures look like. They go beyond elevating the storyboards and they create their own directions. The director defines the amount of time allocated per shot, but the animator creates their own timing and spacing. The timing is when a pose is hit, and spacing is which poses in between are hit. Even the timing locked to a number of frames, the animator has a lot of freedom to induce life into the character effectively. Simply put, a director only describes the main idea in a single frame. The animator has limitless options to execute that main idea in multiple frames. The illustrations also contain a huge degree of direction. Every key pose tells us an idea, as the encapsulation of pre-production departments are represented. The director's touch is apparent in the framing and story moments. The designers are represented in their character designs. Sometimes the scaffolding for environments are drawn as well, incorporating background designers. In drawing, lines are everything, and it applies here to an insane degree. The animators are expected to draw on model, meaning the characters have to maintain the look they've established in character design, like matching a model. This means every animator is required to draw their characters consistently. It's how characters look the same no matter who draws it. So one layer is the lines of the character or animated elements, while other lines are used as separators. This is less apparent in Western animation where shading is done differently. In anime, the animator incorporates the shading primarily in key poses and important frames. This is typically done with a blue line separating light from shadow, indicating form. And the red lines are other color separators like the whites of eyes and highlights. Many more color lines are used if needed. The color fills are for clearer color delineation by visually separating specific colored parts from other colored parts. Imagine a colorist has to color different parts and they're unable to color things separately because the shadow is all one color, so they separate it. These conventions are specific to the studio, so some studios don't follow these and have their own standards that conform to their pipeline. For example, some just have a white and gray, and others have a rainbow of colors. Then the notations describe several directions for layered departments. Every studio has their own notations too, but the practice of writing directions on frames is a very common standard. Timing charts, for one example, describe the timing and spacing for the in-betweeners to understand what to draw, and other things like the simple X's tell the colorist what will be the empty space or not colored in. The rectangles are for compositing to show camera movements, and other directions for compositing are the text for a single frame, describing how an effect is achieved like camera shake or blurs. Writing these directions on the frames is a relic from the traditional anime productions that worked on paper. There are many more standards covering a plethora of situations, and studios include their own on top. Anime production is really unique in its own way of doing things, and including their jargon, and animators working outside of Japan have to learn their particular methods. With the ability to write instructions on the frames, this opens more creative expression for the animation as a whole. The directors have their requirements, but animators create the very foundational drawings that drive the image to polish. On a technical level, they are useful for their clear direction in the pipeline. On an artistic interpretation, I'd argue these achieve a very specific aesthetic. At the end of the day, layout is the skeleton for the rest of the pipeline. It is the connection between planning and production. When properly executed, layout is able to make the production process much smoother. But outside of just a tool, they have an innate power that the entire pipeline is built off of. And layout's power is communication. Along with the animator lingo on the frames, these production materials encompass a kind of expression that combines artistry and practicality. The frames are illustrations on their own that can tell a story and be used as a tool for communication. If art instead is defined as an expression of human creative skill and imagination, executed through beauty and emotional impact, then layout is that. They might not have the ultimate control over what they draw in design and story, but layout within a pipeline succeed that definition. The very frames have a lot of expressions unique to each animator, and every aspect of layout gives the viewer something to think about. Everything from the skill, imagination, beauty, and meaning makes this a standalone piece of work. I'd say layout is art then because of its strongest aspect, which is clarity. A lot of art fundamentals are used to bring out this clarity. The masterful lines and fills gives us form to define the believability of the animated elements. A lot of art fundamentals are used to bring out this clarity. The masterful lines and fills gives us form to define the believability of the animated elements. The multitude of colors to distinguish elements help unravel the ideas distinguishing objects in a composition. The timing and spacing can make us feel something in the way the elements animate. Even something as technical as a cell identifier gives us insight into the animator's intentions or thoughts, making it a part of the piece regardless of the functional intention. Animators then aren't cogs in a machine pushing a vision that isn't theirs. They are visionaries themselves with the power to express more from what they've been given. The ultimate tool they have isn't a software or technique, but it's just clarity. They utilize all aspects of layout to get their intentions onto drawings, and through the use of clarity expresses what the animator wants, what they feel, and what they want you to feel. So animators make beautiful art through this clear communication. The final images have their own expression too, but the incompleteness in Genga has its own meaning worth exploring. Afterwards, the frames get cleaned up and finished in the pipeline. The wonderful work of the following departments polish the shot, ready for the final edit. The culmination of the animator's directions results in a rendered piece for the director's whole work. Colors blend together, which create a unity, integrating elements with the world they belong to. The team create incredible renders, churning through thousands of frames, paintings in their own regard. However, sometimes the animator's touch gets lost. The clarity is stripped away. More often than not, the animator's work gets overshadowed or sometimes plainly darkened and erased, losing details. This is partially why I want to make this video. The final rendered images are wonderful pieces, but the layout and the production materials deserve their respect. For me, I love seeing the behind the scenes, and looking at the production materials helps me love animation even more. And as an animator myself, looking at this stuff just pumps me up. Now the director's vision comes first in the pipeline, and that makes sense, but animators actually enjoy the control they get from drawing layouts. Having control over a sequence of shots gives us lots of fulfillment and fun. So even if the animator's touch isn't seen in the final product, the passion and mastery is felt all the way to the viewer. But I have to be honest, I sort of lied throughout this video. All the footage you see here are mislabeled. These are not the layouts to the final image. They are not done by one incredible animator drawing every frame with every detail filled in. They could be, but they sometimes are not. And that is because anime production is falling apart. I'm not talking about the industry dying or a shortage of artists. Those definitely are issues, but not what I have to bring up. Remember when I called these genga? They are still genga, but the step is a bit more convoluted than just a translation to layout. Genga in the past was typically handled by one person. Layout was when an animation director or an animator themselves draw the placements of characters in the scene from the storyboards, laying out the characters and elements related to the background. If drawn by an animation director, the layout gets sent to the genga artist. If the animator drew it, then they give feedback to it, and then make it into genga. So the genga artists were animators after a layout stage that animated and created the blueprint of the shot, all of what we've been talking about. The important aspects here is that layout and genga were separated, and genga was done by one person. In recent years, this process got complicated. Genga today is really two steps, layout and nigen, or I'll call it translation, second key. More common today, layout is done by the animator, straight from storyboards, and also named first key. The second key is afterwards to clean up drawings and put them on model. Now, just to be extra clear about what I'm talking about, layout was a separate step that integrated the characters and backgrounds more harmoniously with a greater focus on the background and placements of the characters. After layout, the animator would get quality checks and create the key drawings. They are genga. There wasn't a need for first or second key because only one key was needed as the genga. Today, there is still that process of a layout drawing before the genga sometimes, but it's rare. The common practice is to go straight to a combination of traditional layout and key drawings into a step down called layout or first key. After quality checks, the feedback gets sent to second key, who will clean up the first key to make the output known as genga. Here's what a typical traditional layout looks like. It's a still image with way more background details. This is the genga, where backgrounds are less detailed and more animation. Here is a modern layout, where some frames are roughed out. The modern layout still reaches that genga state after those roughed keyframes are cleaned up in second key. So in this new form of layout, the animator has different responsibilities too. They still create direction for the layout departments and have to draw and model, but less emphasis on integrating backgrounds and can sketch some drawings. Guidelines for backgrounds, for example, are preferred. Still, with less backgrounds and phasing out one pipeline step, this can be a lot of work coupled with tight deadlines. After the layout gets quality checks, the second key artist will step in to put the rough layouts on model and address those feedback. It is not the same as in-betweening, which draw entirely new frames. Second key is drawing on the same frames using the same animation and incorporating feedback intended for layout. This is more of what Western animation would call the tie-down. This is like you're tying a character to a rough animation, hence tie-down. Ideally, the layout artist has many keyframes drawn anyway and leaves less work for the second key. And that's why all the shots I've shown you, I can't say how many people worked on the genga. So genga means the result of this step in the pipeline. So if someone says that they worked on layout or second key, they worked on shots where they did that part of genga. But sometimes someone says that they worked on a genga for an anime, and this means that they worked on shots where they did the layout and second key, or maybe only done layout or second key. It can get pretty confusing if unspecified. But this doesn't mean either department has less work or is less reputable. Layout is able to focus on more technical direction and animation. Second key helps the layout artist complete the shot. Also, the second key artist gets valuable drawing experience, improving their draftsmanship. This allows for higher quality animations in general by compartmentalizing the genga into more manageable parts, where both the layout artist and the second key artist can do the best work they want. The final shot has better animation and better accuracy to detailed shots. The addition of second key also made the staff count larger. In episode credits, there is a separate section for second key animators, opening doors for more people to work in anime. More quality anime is being produced and more animators get opportunities, then what's the problem with genga being created this way? Originally, a second key was meant to be a cost-saving practice, meaning it was only supposed to be used on some productions in specific situations. For practical reasons, the split accomplishes high quality while spending less time on each shot, no doubt about that. But the original method encouraged creativity and was a better trajectory for training animators. The first problem with the split is that layouts aren't what they used to be when they were a step on their own. This causes less explorative and immersive integrations coupled with other drops in quality. The second is a lack of quality training for the next generation of animators. In the first problem, the benefit of a separate layout step included more thought put into the planning of a shot. Especially more of the background is incorporated as a practical means to help background departments and to really define the story moment by having that context drawn out. This can be seen in traditional layouts where they had nearly completed backgrounds and characters placed in their worlds. This added context made an environment for animation to fit in, but more importantly describes what story they are part of. This isn't to say layouts were storyboards, but mirrored the essential details that weren't found in storyboards, especially the backgrounds. Directors place them in the frame, focusing on compositional elements and may include backgrounds. But layout artists had to flesh out that frame more. They needed to set design and clearly define what the characters would look like placed in the scene. The storyboards contained a message. The layout made a scaffolding for animators to perform in. Speaking of which, modern layouts are more conservative in their frame count. Each frame added means more polish that needs to happen later down the line, adding more production time. Similarly, the merge has layout artists sending unrefined keyframes and backgrounds, losing another opportunity for that clarity. For second key and background artists, it is more work because of less direction, and sometimes they have to make things up, which is pretty frustrating. This can cause continuity issues across animation sequences, but quality checks catch a majority of them. Still, any vague communications causes problems draining valuable time and resources. This means layout is put in a very vulnerable position. When layout artists are tasked to do tricky perspective from a storyboard, for example, they have to consider the effects on the team and the ultimate deadline. If the artist doesn't create enough clear direction, more mistakes will crop up, meaning more time is needed to fix it. This forces the layout artist to do the best they can with the time they have, which typically means a safer route with less complexity, less performance, and overall less intriguing scenes. The second issue is that newer animators don't get the opportunity to learn from this mode of production. In modern layouts, more rough work is pushed onto the second key animators. Second key, which centers on draftsmanship, and that makes sense to cultivate, but they don't learn anything outside of putting characters on model. In this traditional method, they would usually learn how to make creative decisions by drawing their own layouts from storyboards, then receive feedback and incorporate it to draw the following genga, which would also receive feedback. This new layout forces them to stick to second key, only improving drawing skills and not other art fundamentals. Although this new layout has much more creative control, when a new animator rolls onto the layout role, they are unprepared for it to say the least, and it leads to more problems and less creative risk. Practically speaking, they're forced to learn the animation jargon, have gargantuan deadlines to meet, and integrate into a pipeline they know little about. This affects the second key in ways you'd expect, where layouts could be rough and second key has to make up their frames. To be clear though, the quality of animation isn't affected. The bar quality is still high in the individual elements, where animated cells and backgrounds are probably the best they've ever been. But the way characters are integrated into scenes is sometimes dull and left as if secondary to the highly animated shots. And newer animators aren't trained to handle this new responsibility, primarily learning as they go or stick to safer approaches. On top of all this, the way it's being produced leaves the artists and producers scrambling to the finish line, exhausted and, more importantly, unsatisfied. The layout artists may only see a small resemblance on the finished product if their roughs are too rough, and when colors are applied, then a lot of details are lost. In recent years, the compositing department has expanded to encompass a plethora of effects and entire transformations of the shot. Most often, compositing does a good job polishing the shots though, but sometimes the resemblance of the animation is completely overwhelmed by effects and adjustment layers, especially in a textured element. So layout artists accept being the backbone of the pipeline, but are still under direction from a larger vision, at risk of falling to obscurity. And second key can be an unfulfilling technical position to finish work that isn't theirs, which isn't a bad thing, but they might not have context on the shot and left to that technical role. Launching from layout, genga used to be was a role that thrived on the possibility to be masters of their own scenes. Whoever was after layout relied on the directions from the genga. Without solid direction, these layered departments are lost in how they're supposed to do their job, making for a lower quality result. For artistic reasons, the amount of creative control they had was significant and produced unique shots that had defining characteristics because of the single animator. The way a shot is animated and its action and effects can be felt. Within limits, the animator had a lot of expression that was protected. Directors and supervisors checked their frames for quality and consistency, especially in keeping characters looking like they're supposed to. But when it came to creative decisions, as long as it made sense, it looked good, and the director liked it, then it was put in. As a side effect, animators cultivate their own fan bases that can identify their shots. When an animator is credited as working on a show or film, their fan bases look for their shots and rejoice at the style and work. This was a system that rewarded the personality animators brought to their execution, where hard work and creativity stood out even within the confines of a pipeline. And from that system, feedback flowed correctly to cultivate more talent in a sustainable way. In general, if animators are given enough time, the layouts can get the attention they need where they don't need second key, and layout artists themselves can draw the genga themselves. The frames would go through quality checks that direct feedback to the same artist too, who would improve much more successfully. But the episodic timeline of anime requires high quality animation produced every week, and this is less of a problem on films and streaming, but could still happen depending on scheduling. Anime as a whole has grown popular enough to demand a growing number of shows every season, and more anime doesn't mean more time is allocated for studios to make their shows. Producers choose deadlines that make money, so no matter how it gets done. But every production will have their inevitable problems that cost time. Because of these unforeseen issues, any time-saving methods are desperately welcomed, hence the split of genga. And the popularity of anime attracted a wonderful fandom, but sometimes fans nitpick at minor mistakes. Studios are observant of feedback on social media. When screenshots save prime examples of when quality checks go wrong, studios are more careful of their work. They handle this the best way they can by spending more time meeting that expectation. Essentially, a production that is already pressed on time has to spend more time, increasing pressure and overworking. This doesn't mean to jab at memes. I love looking at broken frames too, but it's important to at least understand the circumstances animators go through. These are a result of overworking by supervisors, directors, and animators who let these tiny mistakes slip by. We can all laugh about it too, even animators that worked on it, but it doesn't help anyone to pick out a frame to joke about, the crew, or the budget. Sometimes this can be misinforming. Coupled with the steep expectations is the expectation for studios to outdo themselves. The character designs have become more complex, and audiences want more explosive animated sequences. Compared to character designs decades ago, the characters of today have a higher number of lines. More lines means more details, which is great for storytelling, but brutal for animators drawing that characters thousands of times. For the pipeline, this exacerbates the problem by requiring 2 animators on the genga, yet quality checks must be implemented somehow. And for the pipeline, they deal with it by including another stage of the same checks for second key. This means an additional number of supervisors having to draw more corrections, meaning more lines and so more work. Anime is also expected to have what is called sakuga. Sakuga just translates to pictures, and the industry just refers to any drawings as sakuga. But the anime community has morphed the term sakuga to mean more highly choreographed, highly energetic, bombastic, fast, and cool animation. Everyone loves these sequences too, that represent high points of the work. It remains a key feature of anime. But both detailed characters and sakuga cost time and money. So while second key was added to meet demands for heavily complex characters and intensely animated shots, the studios need resources and time to pull it off. High quality animation takes time. The notable aesthetic anime is known for takes literal weeks of full-time to overtime days to accomplish. Yet the teams behind these works, no matter how frustrating the means to the end may be, they still strive for the best work they can do. All this culminates into the current fragile yet functional state of anime productions. Fragile because the entire pipeline doesn't have the luxury of a support system, functional because the teams themselves are what keep this industry afloat. The people that work in anime come from the innocence of creative work. They don't see the overtime, the modest pay, and the non-existent reputation. Many quit every single year, but those who stay do it for the love of it. There's a reason these people choose to work in anime. Some do it for the credits, others to get better at their craft, and some for the joy of being part of something bigger. Whatever it may be, the passion pulls them through the hardships and tells them to do it again. And for animators, it was that spark of freedom in the old genga You didn't get to choose your story or your cuts, but the way you executed it made you the protagonist. The keyframes, animations, and technical direction is all that's needed for a genga artist to leave their mark on production. Even if they are another person on the credits, they got to creatively express themselves through the show, and that's enough of a reason to work in anime over and over again. These issues don't come from the teams making these shows, typically come from business decisions. The kind that need a product to air on a specific date, the kind to avoid negative social media, the kind where the images behind the final ones are forgotten. So while the pipeline has evolved to meet the business decisions, the job is different. We're seeing more anime produced than ever before at an ever-increasing bar of quality, but at the cost of sustainability, of lifespans, and of meaning. The anime industry has always made alterations to improve the process of making anime, but are the working conditions and diminishing fulfillment truly worth it? There's always talk of technology supporting artists to make art faster, but a lot of these new technologies miss the mark on what artists actually care about. It isn't about making the art faster or making more anime. It really stems from the issues outside of making art that is the problem. So technology can help the technical skills, but don't help the artist grow or the systemic problems. Therefore, technology may improve working conditions, but it will only mean more work for artists in the long run and forcing more content for the same or less compensation. This also has the possibility of smaller teams and sacrifices the meaningful studio environment. Now, every artist has their own goals for what they want, but the main driving force in studios is that joy of making art as a team. The genga isn't isolated in their own expression and gets to incorporate the artistic eye of several departments before and after them. It can't be a skeleton to a pipeline if there is nobody to run the pipeline. It's fun to receive storyboards and see what you can add to it. It's fun to draw in-betweens for the final frames. It's fun to see the vision come to life together. At least for artists and studios, it may just be a job to make art, but the studio environment doesn't have to suck out creativity, expression, and especially enjoyment. The journey can be worth it even if the vision doesn't belong to individual artists, and genga stands as proof of that. Maybe the solution is making less at a slower pace. Maybe the loudest fans can calm their expectations. Maybe the production materials don't matter. We might not know the answer, and we might not have control over how studios do their job, and we especially can't ask business people to make less money or slow down productions. But we can still show appreciation for the process, to ensure that the work behind the final images don't get forgotten, or worse, disposed of. The essence of anime and animations is in production materials. Looking through a couple of them sheds new light on the artistry behind the final render. It can also represent the story of the production itself. These frames contain story moments and the overarching narrative that they contain, and the people who touch this as well. Genga can then be as insightful as art in museums, often needing a bit of context on how to read genga. But that little bit of knowledge helps you understand these production materials on a deeper level. Every line, therefore, is as unique as a fingerprint. No matter what may get lost in production, the essence behind an image sticks with people, and we can feel that as we watch the final images play. Or if we really love it, we seek out that skeleton for that extra meaning. So can we say that the art behind the art is still art? No surprise there.